Heroes, Gods, and Monsters of the Greek Myths. Part 1, The Gods. Chapter title, Birth of the Twins. Zeus pursued a nymph named Leto, but Hera was watching, so he changed Leto into a quail, and then he himself into a quail, and they met into a glade. Here the sun sifted through the trees and striped the grass with shadows, and it was difficult to see the two quails whose feathers were brown and light brown. But the eyes of jealousy were very sharp. And Hera saw them and flung a curse, saying, Leto, you will grow heavy with child, but you shall not bear anywhere the sun shines. She sent the great serpent Python to enforce her curse, to hunt Leto out of any sunny place she might try the rest. Zeus sent the south wind to help the girl, and she was carried in the wings of the warm, strong wind to an island called Delos. Python swam after her. Before he could reach the island, however, Zeus unmoored it and sent it floating swiftly away, pushed by the south wind, more swiftly than Python could swim. Here, on this lovely island, Leto gave birth to the twins, Artemis and Apollo. Zeus is a terrible husband and a pretty terrible dad. The next chapter, Artemis, is going to bring up some weird stuff that we try not to talk about, but it's here, and it's in it. So we're going to read this. Artemis. Father Zeus was by no means an attentive parent. He had so many children in so many different circumstances, he could scarcely keep them all in mind. However, he was not permitted to forget Leto's children. They were just too beautiful, and beauty was the quality he found most attractive. As he looked down from Olympus, their faces seemed to blaze from among all the children on earth. It seemed to him that they cast their own light, these twins, each one different. Apollo had a ruddy light, Artemis a silver light, and he knew that they were the true godlings and must be brought to Olympus. He sent for them on their third birthday. He had Hephaestus make Apollo a golden bow and a quiver of golden arrows that could never be emptied, and a golden chariot drawn by golden ponies. But he withheld Artemis's gifts. He preferred her, and he wanted her to ask him for things. He took her on his lap and said, "And what gifts would you fancy, little maid?" She said, "I want to be your maiden always, never a woman. And I want many names in case I get bored with one. I want a bow and an arrow too, but silver, not gold. I want an embroidered deerskin tunic, short enough to run in. I need 50 ocean nymphs to sing for me, and 20 wood nymphs to hunt with me. And I want a pack of hounds, please, fierce, swift ones. I want the mountains for my special places, and one city. One will be enough. I don't like cities." She reached up and played with his beard and smiled at him. "Yes, may I have these things? May I?" Zeus answered, "For a child like you, it is worthwhile bearing Hera's wrath once in a while. You shall have more than you ask for. You shall have the gift of eternal chastity, and also the gift of changing your mind about it at any time, which will help you to not want to. And finally, the greatest gift of all, you shall go out and choose your own gifts so that they will have a special value." She kissed him and whispered her thanks into his ear, and then went off running to choose her gifts. She went to the woods and to the river and to the ocean stream and selected the most beautiful nymphs for her court. She visited Hephaestus in his smoking smithy inside the mountain and said, "I've come for my bow. A silver one, please." He said, "Silver is more difficult to work than gold. It needs cool light. It should be made underwater. You must go deep beneath the sea off the land of Lypra, where my Cyclopses are making a horse trough for Poseidon, who thinks of nothing but horses these days." So Artemis and her nymphs swam underwater to where the Cyclopses were hammering were hammering at a great trough. The nymphs were frightened by the sights of the huge one-eyed scowling brutes, and they hated the noise of the hammering, but Artemis jumped up on the forge and said, "I come with a message from Hephaestus. He bids you put aside this horse trough and make me a silver bow and a quiver of silver arrows, which will fill again as soon as it is empty. If you do this, I will give you the first game that I shoot." The Cyclopses, who were very greedy and very tired of working on a horse trough, agreed. When they finished her bow, she thanked them very prettily. But when their leader, Brontes, tried to take him on her knee, she tore a great handful of hair from his chest. He put her down quickly and went away cursing. Holding her silver bow high, screaming with joy, she raced across the field and valley and hill, followed by her nymphs who streamed after her with flashing knees and floating hair, laughing and singing. She came to Arcadia, where Pan was feeding his hounds. "Oh, Pan," she cried, "oh, little king of the wood, my favorite cousin, please, give me some of your dogs, the best ones, please." "And what will you give me in return?" he said, looking at the nymphs. "Choose," she said, "but I should warn you, cousin, that like me they have taken an unbreakable vow of chastity." "Well, never mind," said Pan. "Keep them. What dogs do you need?" That one, and that one, and that one," she cried, "and this one, and I must have him, and him." He gave her his 10 best dogs. 3 of them were huge black and white hounds able to catch a live lion and drag it back to the hunter. The others were lean white deer hounds. Any of them could outrun a stag. Artemis was wild to try out her new gifts. She sent her white hounds racing after 2 deer, bidding them bring back the animals unharmed. She harnessed the deer to her silver chariot and drove away. She saw a tree which had been struck by lightning. It was still smoldering. She had her nymphs break pine branches and thrust them into the cinders, for night was coming and she wanted light to shoot by. She was too impatient to wait for dawn. 4 times she shot her silver bow. First, she split a pine tree, then an olive tree. Then she shot a wild boar. Lastly, she shot an arrow into a sky of unjust men, and the arrow pierced all of them, never ceasing its flight till they were all dead. And the people, seeing her ride over the mountains, wielding her silver bow, followed by the maidens and their torches, called her the goddess of the moon. Some called her the maiden of the silver bow, others called her the lady of wild things. Some called her the huntress, others simply the maiden. And so she had her last gift, many names. She let no man approach her. Once, a young man named Acetaeon glimpsed her bathing in a stream. She was so beautiful he could not bear to look away, so he hid there, watching. Creep. She saw him and immediately changed him into a stag. Good for her. Then she whistled up to her hounds, who tore him to pieces. Well, that was murder, all right? She tried to impose the same rule upon her nymphs, which was difficult. Zeus himself seduced one of the most beautiful, named Callisto. When Artemis learned of this, she changed Callisto into a she-bear and whistled to her dogs. They came leaping and howling and would have torn the bear to pieces too, but Zeus happened to notice what was going on. He caught Callisto up and set her among the stars, still in her bear shape, so that Hera would not be suspicious. Once Artemis found her vow difficult to keep. But that is another story. The story of Orion, which comes later. Apollo. Apollo was the most beautiful of the gods. His hair was dark gold, his eyes stormy blue. He wore a tunic of golden panther skin, carried his own golden bow, and wore a quiver of golden arrows. His chariot was beaten gold. Its horses were white with golden manes and flaming colored eyes. He was the god of the sun always. Later he became the patron of music, poetry, mathematics, and medicine. And later, when he was a mature god, he preached moderation. He bade his worshippers to look first into their own hearts and find there the beginnings of wisdom and to conduct themselves prudently in all things. But in his youth, he did many cruel and wanton deeds. Several times he was almost expelled for the company of gods by Zeus, who he had angered with his wild folly. As soon as he was given his bow and arrows, he raced down Olympus to hunt the python who had hunted his mother. Dryads, who are telltales, told him that he would find his enemy at Mount Parnassus. There he sped, and as he stood on a hill, he saw the great serpent weaving its dusty coils far below. He notched an arrow, drew his bow, and let fly. It darted like light. He saw it strike, saw the huge coils flail in agony. Shouting with savage glee, he raced down the slope. But when he got there, he found the serpent gone. It had left a trail of blood, which he followed to the oracle of Mother Earth at Delphi. Python was hiding in a cave, where he could not be followed. Apollo breathed on his arrowheads and shot them into the cave as fast as he could. They broke into flames when they hit. Smoke filled the cave, and the serpent had to crawl out. Apollo, standing on a rock, shot him so full of arrows he looked like a porcupine. He skinned the great snake and saved the hide for a gift. Now, it was a sacred place, where he had done his killing. Here lived the oracles of Mother Earth, whom the gods themselves consulted. They were priestesses trained from infancy. They chewed laurel, built fires of magic herbs, and sat in the smoke, which drew them into a trance wherein they saw, as told in riddles, what was to come. Knowing that he had already violated a shrine, Apollo thought he might as well make his deed as large as possible, and claim the oracles for his own, bidding them to prophesy in his name. When Mother Earth complained to Zeus about the killing of her python, Apollo smoothly promised to make amends. He instituted annual games at Delphi in celebration of his victory, and these he graciously named after his enemy, calling them the Pythine Games, and he named the oracles Pythonesses. Less excusable was Apollo's treatment of a satyr named Marsyas. This happy little fellow had the misfortune to be an excellent musician, a realm Apollo considered his own, and where he would brook no rivalry. Hearing the satyr praised too often, Apollo invited him to a contest. The winner was to choose a penalty to which the loser would have to submit, and the muses were to be the judge. So Marsyas played his flute, and Apollo played his lyre. They played exquisitely, and the muses could not choose between them. Then Apollo shouted, "Now you must turn your instrument upside down and play and sing at the same time. That is the rule. I go first." Thereupon the god turned his lyre upside down and played and sang a hymn praising the gods and especially their beautiful daughters, the muses. But you cannot play a flute upside down, and certainly you cannot sing while playing it. So Marsyas was declared the loser. Apollo collected his prize. He flayed Marsyas alive and nailed his skin to a tree. A stream gushed from the tree's roots and became a river. On the banks of that river grew reeds, which sang softly when the wind blew. People called the river Marsyas, and that is still its name.